You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. For the first time in 16 years, a new King County executive gave a State of the County address last night. Executive Girmay Zahilay was in Federal Way last night to outline the work he's done in his first 6 months of office and look forward to what he plans to accomplish in the next 3.5 years of his term. Zahilay spoke about new investments in childcare, homelessness, and mental health care amid the rapidly shifting federal environment over the last 1.5 years. He also acknowledged the need to build trust after recent troubling audits looking into KCRHA, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and the county's Department of Community and Human Services. For more, I'm here now with King County Executive Girmay Zahilay. Thank you very much for being back on Soundside.
It's my pleasure, Libby. Thanks so much for having me.
So you are the first new King County executive in more than a decade and a half. You were thrown into the role during this historic flooding emergency. You now have 6 months in the top job under your belt. You laid out a lot of your priorities last night. Can you explain what is your biggest goal when you look forward to the next 6 months in office?
Thank you so much for the question, Libby. It was an electric event last night. I got so much energy from the crowd and all the people watching. I think the top priority in the next 6 months is to continue to build the public's confidence. I spent a lot of time last night talking about the things that we have done to increase transparency and financial accountability. It is just the foundation for everything else. If the public doesn't trust us, we can't work on homelessness and housing and behavioral health and climate action and so much more. And so it's going to be to continue to make sure that people see that we're delivering. We're delivering on the priorities that they set out on. So whether that's making sure that Sound Transit continues to deliver voter-approved projects despite a $35 billion deficit, or stabilizing a regional homelessness response system, or fixing the issues that people have seen in our county departments through audits. Those are the issues that we want to continue prioritizing because everything else comes after that.
Yeah, on that topic, the stabilizing and the issue of trust, in your speech yesterday, you talked about investments in childcare, especially ages 0 to 3. So that would be new investments in childcare would be funded by the Best Start for Kids levy, which has to be renewed by voters next year. But taxpayers are probably feeling burned right now because Best Starts for Kids money went to many of these community programs that are now under scrutiny for possible misuse of funds. For people just catching up, the audit last year found $690,000 in questionable contracts at the Department of Community and Health Services. More than half of the DCHS contractors the audit looked at were flagged for problems. The county ombuds office said last month that likely fraud, waste, or abuse by contractors occurred. So what is the process to repair trust when it comes to taxpayer money being in safe hands?
For sure. The first thing that we have to do, Libby, is properly define the scope of those issues. I do not want people to take away that because they've seen King County in the news for these audits pretty regularly over the past year from one set of issues and take that to mean that we have a government that is fraught with these issues. That was a narrow portion of the resources from Best Starts for Kids and an even narrower proportion of the work that King County does. So a big part of my goal last night was to remind people that King County's workforce delivers excellent services repeatedly, almost across the board. So when you're outside and you're catching the bus and it's coming on time, or when you're being connected through our Sound Transit services, or when you flush your toilet and don't have to think about whether our environment is going to be clean after that, or when you go out to a King County park that's well maintained, there are so many good things that this county government does, and I want people to remember that. The second thing we have to do is root out all the issues where they do exist and build back that confidence and show people that there are systemic changes that have been made. And so when we go out and ask for a renewal of a levy, we have the adequate and even above and beyond level of administrative oversight and financial controls, and that we have installed all of the oversight functions across all of our departments through our internal audit director, and that we've done base budgeting for the first time to really hold every single dollar accountable and not just roll over programs from year to year. I want people to see that this is an excellent organization that's the best run regional government in the country. And yeah, now let's work together to get the resources that are needed to solve huge problems like the childcare crisis or the housing crisis. That's the message that I'm going to deliver to our voters and to our constituents.
One more question on the situation with the audit. Law enforcement and the state auditor are getting involved with the DCHS investigation now. The original county audit only sampled a small number of DCHS grantees for review.
Yep.
The Seattle Times reported that the county is now putting all contracts under review. So I wonder if, I know that it's been in the news a lot lately, are there more shoes to drop in this? Is this just the tip of the iceberg? Are you thinking that between the law enforcement investigation and the widening review process, there may be more issues to uncover?
There may be more issues, and we are going to be aggressive about rooting out those issues and holding people accountable. So we're working with the King County Council to set up a centralized function for anyone to report fraud, waste, and abuse, and then we will hold those individuals accountable. We're closely reviewing our entire budget. Like I mentioned for the first time, we're not just going to roll over 90% of the budget from one year to the next. Instead, we're building our budgets from the ground up, taking a real critical eye toward all of our programs, making sure that they're delivering the results that we want to see. We have an accountability and transparency subcommittee that brings together all of our department directors on a regular basis to find out if there are any risks or any issues. We have a much stronger conflict of interest policy that we're rolling out countywide. And so if these issues exist, they will be rooted out. And I want people to have confidence that we're working really aggressively on this.
From one audit to another, this one, a joint agency between the city and the county, something that has been also under scrutiny lately, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. KCRHA had an audit that found various examples of financial mismanagement, $8 million misplaced. All of this is something that has been of top concern for both you and Mayor Wilson in Seattle, and you both announced that the county and the city are going to put this independent financial analyst embedded in KCRHA. Do you think that's enough to turn KCRHA around? What are you watching for as this process goes forward?
No, I don't think it's enough. And it's important for me to start off by saying I have so much gratitude for the great work that the employees of the Regional Homelessness Authority do. They are dedicated public servants. They've been moving people from the streets and into housing and saving lives for a long time. And I will say that they were not set up to succeed. I don't think this is a structure that is going to work in the long term. And so, absolutely, we need to stabilize the organization in the short term. And so the actions that you just described of embedding a financial oversight individual from the city and the county to watch the agency and then do all the other short-term actions we need to just take control and make sure that there are no more issues. That's important in the short term. And in the long term, I think we need a regional reset. And what exactly that looks like will be determined by broad stakeholdering. I will work with Mayor Katie Wilson, the Seattle Council, the King County Council to bring service providers and regional leaders together to say, what is the next chapter going to look like? And it's really important that we have stability in the meantime, because there are millions and millions of dollars of federal resources at risk. And we need to be able to continue receiving those resources and delivering services, because at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to give people stability, whether that's housing or behavioral health resources for the people who are living outside.
So amid the turmoil at the joint agency, you are at the county level going ahead with work on homelessness. You announced last night that the county is going to be opening 80 beds of supportive tiny houses in Seattle. You vowed to open 500 new units of housing and shelter beds in 500 days. Now, you made that announcement in March, so that makes your deadline the middle of next summer. We know this work is hard. I mean, Mayor Wilson was on the show yesterday and talked about the challenges of siting and paying for shelter beds. 500 units before the World Cup did not materialize in Seattle. Your goal, if I may say, seems a little bit more realistic. But how do you get to 500 beds?
So it's important to also note that even though that number might seem modest, I'm talking about net new units. So I'm not counting the units that have already been in King County's pipeline. And so I'm not going to say, the investment that King County made of 235 affordable housing units at Northgate that has been in the works for years. I'm not going to take credit for that as part of the 500. And I'm also not going to count the units that we have to preserve from funding losses. So we have a big shelter in Soto that sleeps something close to 300 people every night that right now is not going to receive funding by May 2027. It might close, and I'm going to work as aggressively as I can to find those resources. But if we find those resources, I'm not going to count those 300 toward mine. So we're talking about net new on top of everything else. So it is an ambitious goal because unlike the city of Seattle, King County doesn't have a dedicated housing levy yet. And we can talk about that later and the plans for pursuing that. And so, how we get there is really being scrappy, finding the resources, looking under the couch cushions for money, finding partnerships with the private sector, with the city of Seattle, with our regional partners, and really doing everything we can to prioritize housing that can be stood up really quickly, for example, like tiny house villages, but also not forgetting about the other things that are really important, like permanent supportive housing or workforce housing. So I think we're going to be able to get there. I'm confident that we are. And the announcement last night was that we're going to take a big chunk out of that goal with the new tiny house village that I announced of 80 units in Seattle. And I'm going to share more information about that here very soon, but didn't want to get ahead of our community outreach process in the specific neighborhood where it will be sited.
Something we saw in the city of Seattle, in the past few years is as those COVID dollars went away, it was really hard to stay above water with the number of shelter beds. And you kind of mentioned that problem. The Salvation Army shelter is going to lose the money that you just mentioned. So that's 270 beds. What is it going to take to, I guess, make sure that you don't move backwards? I mean, maybe this is when we talk about, is a housing levy on the table for that dedicated source of funds?
It is. It's on the table. And I didn't go out and just announce that we're doing a housing levy because I think there's a lot of public confidence and public trust building that has to happen. I took this office under the swirl of so many different issues from the Regional Homelessness Authority and the forensic audit, the audit issues at the county departments that we've talked about, the large deficit at Sound Transit. And so for me to go out and just say we're doing another levy before I've shown people that, hey, we're going to be good with the resources that we have first, I didn't think that would be wise. So we're exploring that levy. In the meantime, we're doing that public trust building. I think that's really important. And so, yes, a potential levy is in the works where that would give us a generational investment in all types of housing. And we also have to be much better with the resources that we have and prioritize what's important. To me, the housing crisis, the homelessness crisis, the distinct but overlapping issues of homelessness and behavioral health and violence and incarceration, those are my top policy priorities. And so looking at the budgets we have, seeing how we can reattribute resources toward those issues, being more accountable with our dollars, and through our base budgeting process, finding out what programs are not working, which programs are not delivering the results that we want, and being able to reallocate to the things that quickly get people off of the streets and provide them stability. That's going to be a priority as we also find new revenue through a potential levy, through potential partnerships, through potential lobbying of the state and the federal government. It's a all hands on deck comprehensive approach to getting there.
Hanging over all of this are the changes at the federal level. So there's a potential for HUD grants to shift because the Trump administration is really trying to move away from the housing first model, which is a widely used model, not just in King County, but in a lot of places that prioritizes housing for people who get stabilized first and then addresses issues like mental health and substance use treatment. So last week, the White House released this revised plan to move continuum of care money away from long-term housing programs and towards this more limited window set of programs that would focus on treatment first. This new policy is going to face a court challenge, but it would be a major shift for providers in our area. It could mean that a lot of people end up back on the street. How do you prepare for this kind of uncertainty and the wave that could possibly crash on providers in King County?
We have to fight it. I think this policy from the federal government is a mistake, and I think it is premised on a misunderstanding of what housing first means. Housing first does not mean housing only. Housing first is one of the tools in our toolkit for addressing the diversity of the issues that we see on our streets. Some people need low barrier access because addiction is a disease. Addiction is not something you can control. It's something that requires repeated efforts and wraparound services, and people relapse and they go through these issues. And it's much better for them to go through that long journey with a roof over their heads rather than being stopped at the door and having the door closed in their face and saying, go through that journey outside in the elements. I don't think that's the right way to do it. And of course, it doesn't mean housing only. Like I mentioned, once people are brought inside, they get full wraparound services. And I've seen that firsthand from the great services that our providers provide. And it's also true that some people uh, can do fine in sober housing as well. We need to stop having this one size fits all issue, but to take away one of the critical tools in our toolkits for the people who need low barrier access. I think that's a big mistake, and it will absolutely have consequences in places like Seattle and broader King County. And so our lawsuits are designed for that, to push back. We will do everything we can to stop these new requirements and this new criteria. And at the same time, we also have to show our federal partners that we will be good stewards of resources. And so I know some people are worried about jeopardizing our federal resources with respect to making any changes at the Regional Homelessness Authority. But I just saw some news in LA that the audit issues in their homelessness entity ended up losing them resources from the federal government. So at the same time that we push back on these changes to criteria, we also have to display a sense of great and excellent stewardship with public resources that I don't think is happening right now, and we will do everything that we can to make that happen.
Basically, at the same time, you're fighting to defend what's being received from the federal government. You're also looking to clean up the house and make sure that there's nothing out of order that can be used as an excuse to cut off funds.
For sure, for sure.
I want to talk finally about sound transit. Obviously, the board voted recently to address this $34.5 billion budget gap. The plan is to get that line from South Kirkland to Issaquah finished. That has a target open date of 2050. Graham Street gets the infill station that has long been promised. That spine, Everett to Tacoma, is going to be finished. West Seattle, but Ballard. The Ballard line is going to stop at Seattle Center right now. That has a lot of people in Northwest Seattle upset. I spoke to Mayor Wilson about this yesterday, and she said her full attention is going to be on the Ballard line. And she said that the rumors of its demise have been greatly exaggerated. What is your perspective on the Ballard line and the future of Sound Transit moving forward?
Libby, you brought up a great point, which is that we delivered on so many of our priorities around King County. We fought really hard. We got the West Seattle link is being built. The Graham Street infill station is being built. We're advancing the 4 line to connect South Kirkland and Issaquah. We got $10 million of transit mitigation funds for Tukwila as we advance the Boeing Access Road to full design. And so we have all of these accomplishments around the region. And it's also true that there was reasonable anger and frustration with respect to our Ballard community, and we need to do much better for them. But I do think it's important that we have a nuanced conversation about that. And I think that's what Mayor Wilson was doing. First and foremost, there have been some people who've been pushing a false narrative about how you can fund projects around the region. They've been saying, look at Pierce County and Snohomish County got everything what that they wanted at the expense of Ballard. That's not how funding at Sound Transit works. It's not one bank account that you can apportion money to different projects to. You can think of it as multiple different bank accounts where you have to fund projects in the same area where that revenue came from. That's what the ST3 governing documents tell us. It's called sub-area equity. So money raised in Snohomish has to be spent in Snohomish. Money raised in Pierce has to be spent in Pierce. Money raised in North King County, where Ballard is, that has to be spent in North King County. So Ballard is not in competition with Pierce and Snohomish. Ballard is in competition with West Seattle and Graham Street. That is the complication that we were dealing with. And at the same time, Ballard's costs went up from $6 billion to $21 billion. So it had by far the highest cost escalation of any project. So that's the problem statement that we were dealing with limited tools to solve it for the short term. For the long term, there are a lot of tools that we can pursue to fix this problem. And that's what my amendment commits Sound Transit to doing, which is find the cost savings opportunities while funding full design. So for the next 4 years, 4 or 5 years, Sound Transit's going to be doing the same work that it would have been doing even if the vote had gone another way a couple of weeks ago, which is for the next 4 years, we're going to be getting to full design on the Ballard Link extension. We're going to pursue partnerships with the state, with our private sector partners. We're going to put out an RFP for exploring different design options and cost savings opportunities. So we have a 4 or 5 year timeline where we're going to be really aggressive about getting to Market Street. I know the great work that Board Member Dan Strauss and Mayor Wilson have been doing is gonna get us there, and we're gonna partner with our state delegation, the 36th legislative district state delegation. They're all good partners. We're all meeting regularly. Our Seattle council members. So you have an all hands on deck approach where so many different governments are aligned in making this happen. And I want the Ballard community to know that they have their county executive committed to working with their mayor, their council members, their state delegation to getting to Market Street.
King County Executive Girmay Zahilay, the last time we talked, it's been a minute, you just had a new daughter born. And I'm just wondering if I could get a really quick update. How's the family doing? How's Jazzy doing as a big sister?
Thanks, Libby. I think the last time we spoke, you were hearing Jazzy make some noise.
She was on the call. Yep.
And I'm proud to share with you that her little sister Zoe is even louder than Jazzy. So I have to actually go hide downstairs. Otherwise, you'd be hearing a little 5-month-old screaming in your ear all day. But everybody's doing good. Thank you so much for asking.
I'm glad to hear it. Hope we can talk again soon. Thank you so much, County Executive, for being here.
Thank you, Libby. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.